Most families don't realize it, but the 5 years before retirement are often more important than the 30 years after. This window might be your last chance to correct mistakes and close some of the gaps and protect everything that you've worked so hard for. And yet, strangely, this is exactly the time when most people take the biggest risks without even understanding or knowing it.
As certified financial planners who've guided hundreds of high net worth families through this exact phase, we'll show you what really matters during this final stretch.
So what's the misconception? The misconception is that retirement date is just a date. I'm going to retire December 31st, and that's my retirement. When in fact, this is a long process with a lot of twists and turns along the way. So in reality, this retirement red zone, the 5 years before retirement, is extremely important since it's going to affect the 30 years after. Now remember, if you make a mistake that affects you when you're 80, you don't have the luxury of going back to work. If you make a mistake when you're 50, you can go back to work. So in this retirement red zone, a lot of times people tend to make emotional decisions. Emotional decisions, as we're going to talk about on these videos, are oftentimes the worst decisions.
Don't you find they just take too much risk in this red zone?
Well, yes, and there are points in time that it's easy to take risk. When the wind is at your back and the markets are friendly, everything's easy. And if the markets go up indefinitely and never go down, they don't need us and we can all drive a Bentley. That's not necessarily reality. So, the couple of things that families do is they make emotional decisions, they take undue risk, and they fail to address the proper planning and things like the tax landmines that are going to come up.
So this video is for educational purposes only. Always, always consult qualified professionals before making legal, tax, or investment decisions.
Well, let's start with it. There are a couple major storms brewing. First, wealthy families are simply anxious. There was a study recently, 65% of high net worth families are concerned about the cost of health care and long-term care and how it's going to affect them. That's just one example. One aspect of what they're going to do. Here's another thing. 105,000 advisors are projected to retire in the next decade. What if one of them is yours? I think it's something for you to think about, right? So this stuff isn't just relevant, it's somewhat urgent.
That's a really underestimated statistic, as it's going to cause huge disruption in people's financial plans, having disruption with their advisors.
I think the end result is the people with the most money are going to get the most advice, unfortunately.
Advice is going to be scarce.
So let's break this down into, we'll call it 5 areas that require proactive focus in this retirement red zone. The first one is stress testing. I think what's important for people is to evaluate, how is it structured? How is my plan structured? And what could go wrong with it?
Sequence of return risk is a very understood.
Explain sequence of return risk.
In simplest form, it's what if I retire at a bad time? What if I retire before economic disruption?
So let's say the most prevalent or most memorable recent economic turmoil was 2008, 2009, what they call the Great Recession.
Yeah, if you retired at the end of 2008 and didn't plan properly, you went back to work in 2010.
Right. And because the portfolios were under pressure, many of the world global stock markets were down. It was a very, very difficult time. So one of the common mistakes is assuming the good times are going to last forever.
You just can't assume past returns will continue.
Right. And if any financial publication that you look at is the disclaimer that says past performance is not indicative of future results, and the reason is we have such a cyclical economy, things go up, things go down. So as a best practice, what we recommend is that you evaluate your portfolio for the bad times starting now and some good times perhaps down the road. We call it a second opinion, we call it a stress test. The next aspect is talk about the income timeline. And Sam, I think it's helpful for you to shed some light on that.
So if you create income streams for the first 5 or 10 years of retirement that are not associated with any kind of market risk, you can then have predictable income that allows you to weather the storm if you retired at a bad time. Keep in mind, there's not a billboard out there saying don't retire now, it's going to be a bad time. We only know it's a bad time as we reflect on when we retired and what's happened since.
So we talk about a further aspect of sequence of return risk. We talk about optimizing the timeline of your portfolio. When do I take money out? How do I structure my portfolio so it matches up? We have to coordinate things like pensions, Social Security.
And what are the tax implications of those cash flows?
One of the best practices, and we call it oftentimes a bucketing strategy. How do we plan the cash flows for your retirement to try to mitigate some of the risks that we all know we're going to face?
Yeah. Again, taxes. You spend after-tax money. A lot of times we take money out of plans that you have to pay taxes on. So you have to manage and plan for the amount of taxes you have to pay before you can spend it.
I think another aspect of taxes, which is the third topic, and a tax map, or we call it a tax plan. Doesn't it make sense to try to lower your lifetime income tax bill? On top of that, there's a couple aspects that people tend not to consider. One of them is our taxes on sale. We think taxes are low. I mean, historically speaking.
They're at historic lows. It's very unlikely they go lower, and there's a lot of room for them to go higher. So you have to plan for the what ifs of what if we're in a different tax structure and that money that I've never paid taxes on now gets taxed at a higher rate before I get to spend it. That could have a significant impact on the overall financial health of your retirement plan.
It's almost like inflation. You have less buying power from your portfolio. Another aspect of tax planning, again, talking about married couples now, is the someday singles tax scenario. Our father died in 2019, and in 2020, our mom became a single taxpayer. And so everybody faces this someday single. It might be tomorrow, and it might be 20 years from now.
And her tax bill all but doubled in 2020 as a single taxpayer versus what they paid in 2019.
And the reason is all of the income tax brackets are cut in half. So,
as is the standard deduction.
And as are the Medicare surcharge brackets, which we call IRMAA, I-R-M-A-A. So we need to think about tax planning, and the tax planning's goal is to lower your lifetime income tax bill, and I think it's something that's really, really important.
So one of the best practices today is look at Roth conversions and see if they make sense. If you believe like we do that taxes are low and could be higher, it's an opportune time to pay taxes now when rates are effectively lower.
Fourth aspect, thinking about legality, legal layers for spouses and kids. And there's a statistic out there that 70% of surviving spouses change advisors after the death of usually a financial spouse. So we talk in terms of the financial spouse and the non-financial spouse. Typically, in a married couple, there is a financial spouse, the one that handles all of the investments, handles all the aspects of the money, and the non-financial spouse who just says, is it okay if I buy a new, X, Y, or Z, a new widget?
Who all the time, almost always brings a lot of other things to the table in the marriage, but is not involved in the financial decisions and investing decisions.
Right, because only one person has to sign a check, only one person has to pay the bills. Not always, but often. So we need to be thinking about this scenario. And we're going to give you a couple scenarios. If we have a married couple, sometimes they're do-it-yourselfers. Sometimes one of the spouses has an advisor. Jokingly, an attorney friend of mine told me a few years back that his financial advisor jokes that he only meets the spouse at the financial spouse's funeral, which I thought was kind of strange. I don't know why you'd want to do it that way. So if you think about your particular situation, if you are the financial spouse, would it make sense for you to have your non-financial spouse meet your advisor? Is the advisor asking the right questions? If you're the non-financial spouse, we've had non-financial spouses say, I'm going to go talk to Paul or Sam because if you're not here anymore, I need a relationship with somebody that can do it. And I just think it makes a lot more sense for people to start thinking ahead.
Yeah.
And asking the right questions.
So that attorney friend who meets the non-financial spouse at the funeral, that makes perfect sense why 70% of surviving spouses find new advisors because there's no continuity, there's no game plan in place. They're out on their own. They might as well start over with a new person.
So the fifth aspect is rehearse the plan. Sam jokingly says that in retirement, every day is a Saturday.
If you think about while you're working, what day of the week do you spend the most money? Typically a Saturday.
I spend it on Saturday.
When you're retired, every day's a Saturday. Some people actually spend more money in retirement than they do when they were working, because Monday through Friday, they don't shop. Mm-hmm. They don't do things that cost a lot of money because they're working. Mm-hmm. And in retirement, no holds barred. I mean, every day is an opportunity for them to do and spend more money.
You need to think about your budget. And even though you may have a budget while you're working, that budget may be underestimating things because every day is a Saturday and you're going to be spending more money in retirement than you had while you were working. So a couple of examples of people that have, I want to call it made mistakes. Not that we're picking on anybody, and a lot of times it's before they met us. Sometimes we have to pick up the pieces. There's a local company that at age 70 and a half, you're required to take all of your 401k out. And we've had people come to us and said, oh yes, I took all the money out of my 401k when I was 40 and a half, and they ended up paying taxes and all of it, sometimes 7 figures. They certainly could have done better by paying less taxes. Another situation, we had a divorce, and it ended up being a fairly bitter divorce. The husband never changed his beneficiary and ultimately died, and his ex-spouse inherited his money. I mean, and he's probably rolling over in his grave thinking about it, but these are the kinds of things that we think they happen. They usually happen to somebody else, but we want to try to prevent them from happening to you.
Talk about a successful outcome, a successful approach.
Well, I think, why don't you? I think you've...
Yeah, I had a bunch of clients retire at the end of 2021, and the economy was booming. They turned the page to 2022, and all kinds of bad things happened, economic, both here and abroad. And the markets went down precipitously for the first 8 or 9 months. The reason these clients were able to survive that, unscathed, is because they had planned to provide income streams for the first 5 and in some cases 10 years of retirement that weren't market sensitive. So the investments that were affected by the negative markets, they didn't need that money for 10 or 15 years, and they determined, why mess with it now? Let it alone, let it recover, and fortunately it has.
So what do you do next? Number one, quick story. I was at a bar function many, many years ago, and I was a very young attorney, and I was with an old attorney, and he said, Paul, you will not be a great attorney when you have all the answers. You'll be a great attorney when you have the right questions to ask. And I never forgot that. And throughout my life, we've always tried to have ourselves ask the right questions of ourselves, ask the right questions of our clients, other professionals, attorneys, accountants, whatnot, and ask the right questions to our clients.
Yeah, you will get better outcomes when you or your advisors ask better questions on your behalf.
We want to help arm you with the right questions to ask as time goes on. Second thing, be conservative in your thinking. There are always expenses coming around the road that are going to affect you that you don't know about. Had a client, his car was parked, storm came, blew the tree over, smashed his car. He wasn't planning on buying a new car. He had to buy a new car because his car was totaled. So think about it. Every day is a Saturday. There's always unexpected things. Plan conservatively. We think makes the most sense for your portfolio is that you have money readily available and manageable and liquid for the times you need it. For example, if you're planning on buying a car in January of next year, you don't put that money into the high-risk stock market. You put that money into something that's fixed and interest-bearing and is going to be there when you have to make the car payment. Is your current advisor asking the right questions? Are they addressing all of these things? Are they doing things other than just investing? We say investing is the easy part because all of this other planning is what's difficult. It requires us to ask the right questions of you, have you provide us with the necessary information.
If they're not asking the right questions, who's going to? Who's going to be your advocate? Who's going to be able to have you get through the tough times if you haven't planned for the tough times?
If you're married, include your spouse. Can't say enough about that.
Much better continuity when you have two spouses engaged, not necessarily making the ultimate decisions, but in understanding what's going on and what happens if one of them, it's not if somebody passes on, it's inevitable, right?
Or becomes incompetent. So, I mean, we make very few guarantees, but the one guarantee that we will make is that either you will get old and infirm or you will pass along, or both. And it's that type of planning that so often goes overlooked because it's always, we say mañana, it's always tomorrow. But tomorrow's going to be today, one of these days. So the best legacy isn't about passing on just the wealth. It's about passing on your values and passing on the plan to the next generation. Clarity, alignment, and confidence. We can't stress confidence enough. For your family, are more valuable than just numbers in an account.
Yeah, I often say, and I really think it's true, the confident retiree lives a better retirement than the one is not confident and is unsure about, is this decision going to cause me to run out of money, down the road. When you have confidence in your plan, you live a better retirement. End of story.
And remember, this red zone might be your last chance to shape your financial future. So if you're within 5 to 10 years of retirement, you're uncertain about taxes, you don't know what's going on with that, start thinking about what you can do. The topic of the next talk is about taxes, and we're going to talk about strategies that you can use, that wealthy families use to try to mitigate taxes at what we call lower your lifetime income tax bill. You'll learn exactly what you need to do so you can avoid regrets later.